conform to the rules of that way of life. So that's become a human instinct by evolution, I would say, quite clearly. And the trouble is that loyalty instinct has now been hijacked by strange new phenomena with no real breeding, as some people would say, and no validity. The main two aspects of PC in New Zealand, as we've observed it over the last almost a decade, you might say vaguely, the main two components are primarily women's lib, and secondly, but very important, as exemplified by the slogan Aotearoa is Māori land, a Saint Māori attitude, the idea that people who, one has to add, say they are descended in part from the Polynesians of these islands are somehow superior, have been systematically, viciously oppressed. There's only one P in that word, by the way. It's one of the tip-offs for PC, oppressed.
And there's a way of spelling women, isn't there?
In various ways, yes. And that if you're sensitive to the facts of the matter, then you will be in favour of various beliefs, all of which are difficult of practice and in many cases intellectually invalid. It's the women's lib aspect which I think has done the most harm, has achieved the most influence, and is now really sweeping all before it, while continuing to intone, we are powerless. I would say we're observing the famous overswing of the pendulum. People like me, growing up in the 50s, were aware that victimising folk on ground of race is wrong, and during the 60s it became very widely agreed that victimising people on grounds of sex is wrong and should be expunged. And so in acting on those realisations, we've swung right out the other side with these pendula from the old order, which certainly did exist, of course, still chanting as though it does prevail today, and making ludicrous concessions which nobody can rightfully want and which do more harm than good, thus promoting women far above their level of ability in important hierarchies, which has gone on all over the place in our country, and similarly with regard to Maoris, and I say so as a pro-Maori Pākehā.
So then in what sense has the PC movement now gone too far? I mean, how can there be too much anti-racism, anti-sexism, anti-whateverism it is that is...
Well, the first answer to that is relatively notoriously what is called affirmative action. And since I'm in a sort of critical mode, let me say that nothing I'm criticising is any process that I have been no part of. I was one of the prime movers to get the special Maori places in the Auckland Medical School when I was on the medical faculty there. It seemed to me the wise thing. It had been done in good American medical schools such as Cornell. Let in non-whites who have inferior qualifications, give them special help once they're in, but of course apply the same standards for passing to them. That was the model from the Cornell Medical School, and the Chicanos and blacks let in with no academic qualifications, but with counselling from senior members of their own culture, did better than the students on average in that Ivy League university. I thought it was a good example. And so we enact a rule here to let them in and then more or less cast them adrift. I'm not proud of it. It hasn't worked out well. But to the extent that you do it properly, it has to be faced up to that it does cause somebody else to be excluded who may be rightly aggrieved. And so I think the
especially if he has better qualifications.
Definitely. It's happened in the University of California in a big way too, regarding the issue between blacks and Orientals in that case. And so people, if they're going in for affirmative action, which I still favour qualitatively, it's the right kind of idea, they should have much clearer notions of how much of it, at what rates are we going to act on this. And so, for instance, the University of Southern Queensland, which I confess to not having heard of before, and now says over the next year all the permanent positions, all appointments to tenure, will be to women only. Now, that is not liable to work out very well.
Dr. Bob Mann, retired lecturer in environmental studies at Auckland University.
Oppressors.
White males.
Oppressed.
White females. And all non-whites.
Heightism.
Prejudice against the vertically challenged.
Alternative dentation.
False teeth.
Hispies.
Herpes.
Individual with unmet objectives.
Loser.
Achievement of deficiency.
Failure.
Anna Penn achieved a deficiency in her Cultural Safety or Culture and Society course, part of her first-year nursing studies at the Christchurch Polytechnic, thus deficiency achieving her whole course. The administration claims she was guilty of insensitivity towards her Māori lecturer on a marae. She claims she merely questioned outlandish assertions by him, such as that Māori printing presses were thrown into the sea by the invading Pākehā. The experience of being deficiency achieved has left her wondering about the value of the cultural safety course in the first place.
To tell you the truth, it is so mixed with such fear, I can speak for myself, that it actually makes you really edgy. How can I say that? You're very, very aware that you're dealing with a Maori person. Right, I can't say because I've never been out as a student nurse, but, even now, just personally, I'm very aware that I'm around a Maori person. I can't explain that very well.
You're paranoid about breaching protocol,
yeah,
perhaps.
Yeah, it's almost gone overkill. But the thing too is, I've worked in the East End in London. I've been on call for 6 hospitals there, and it is predominantly ethnic-based all round there.
Mm.
I was the only white nurse on a ward. It is predominantly ethnic,
And you didn't need a course in those ethnic cultures to make you a good nurse.
It's just nous. It's common sense. You've either got it or you haven't. I think it's being politically correct. They are really, really jumping on the bandwagon and just going overboard.
A much earlier casualty of cultural sensitivity requirements in the Christchurch Polytechnic's nursing course was Peter Adams, now farming in the Canterbury area. As far back as 1987, he achieved a deficiency in his cultural studies, but was told he could continue his course if he rubbed noses with a room full of Māori. He agreed under duress and went on with his studies, ultimately to graduate. But he says he and his fellow students regarded the cultural sensitivity classes with a discreet contempt.
Most students that I was with, we just considered it was part of a sort of a silly game that you had to play, where you just had to agree with them all to pass your exam. No one really took it seriously.
Did you see any other aspects of the syllabus being sacrificed so that this cultural safety could become part of the curriculum?
Oh, well, very much so, but the thing is, I didn't realise how bad it was until I was away from it, because they start off being, I suppose it's quite subtle and quite gradual, and by the time you're fully enmeshed in it, you don't really realise just how absurd it all is. But they were giving, more and more weight to these cultural things. It's not actually. I wouldn't say it is cultural. It's the word that I've seen used in the media is this treatyism. It's a sort of an extremist view of what Maori culture actually was, and it's actually not really based on reality. When they teach us, say, revisionist history, they teach us the new version of Maori and European interactions. They start from a belief that as Europeans, we're all highly racist and we have to change to their way of thinking. For instance, I was told in 1987 that Captain Cook had actually been found lost in the Pacific by some Rarotongans and brought to New Zealand. He had been saved by them, and he was lost in that.
Did you question that?
Hell no. By then I realized I was in a lot of trouble from questioning similar stupid statements, and I realised that they were not. It wasn't a type of education that fostered debate. If you said, "Well, what book was that in?" if you'd questioned it, they'd say, "Oh, so don't you like Maoris then?" But that was whether they said it directly or whether it came out in more subtle means. The thing to do was you just agreed with them, and that was that. It was the same when they were teaching us. They had a special group of people that came out and taught us all about the Treaty of Waitangi. And I mean, it wasn't the sort of thing that you ask questions about. I mean, there's various different ways you would look at the whole thing, and including the state of warfare and cannibalism and slavery that was going on at the time. But I mean, you wouldn't ask anything like that. You wouldn't even mention it. You just agree with them because they had so much power over you. Because a lot of the way that they assessed you was on a lot of it was very subjective.